and the Member of Parliament from Bain and Grantstown on what I thought was a singularly spectacular achievement, those relays that took place here on the 24th and 25th of May. And I wrote a note to both of them because I missed the relays, and so watched it via the internet. And that is, they must have felt exceptionally proud, having started out as athletes themselves, as young men themselves, to be able to stand up in that stadium and be involved in a ceremony from the public policy end in something which they could never have imagined way back in 1960 or 1959. And I envy them to this extent that I hope that in my own career that there's something that I could accomplish in my lifetime for this country that could match that kind of feeling. And I was searching around to say, what could that possibly be? I mean, most of my life has been essentially philosophical or intellectual, and so I thought maybe with this rights issue, that's something that might be pursued. Been talking about tolerance in the society since I was in my 20s. I'm able to give voice to it. And then recently we had all this back and forth because of the views I espoused down in Trinidad and Tobago, and you know what I was and what I wasn't, and people saying that how could I say that my career suffered because of my views, and I see recently they've now started, the deputy leader of the Free National Movement, I see some of the propaganda pieces have now started calling her LGBT on the web. And what do you think they do that for? That's again, you know, these acts of prejudice designed not to look at people's accomplishments or their intellect, but to try and blow a kind of dog whistle to invite prejudice. So maybe I'll get that opportunity as time goes on to come to a situation where we do have a regime where, and we were just discussing this at the break, several of the members of Parliament, myself, during the break, about this whole question of discrimination. And I told them that there's this court case that is very interesting, which was just decided by the Bahamian Court of Appeal called Ma and Colley, in which you have two males, gay men in the Bahamas, and the Court of Appeal applied the law of England to a domestic situation here in the Bahamas, even though they applied the law against the appellant. But by fits and starts, things are moving in a more tolerant direction, I think, and I hope. But I do want to again say congratulations to both the Member of Parliament for Bain and Grantstown and the Prime Minister for just a wonderful gift which they gave to the young people of this country in that stadium and those relays. And I really hope that they appreciate the gift and are able to take it to the higher heights that we expect from them. I was preceded to this lectern or microphone by the Member of Parliament for South Abaco, who I first met when I was a student in the UK in 1972 at a press conference that was held by the late Sir Lyndon Pindling following the constitutional talks. It may have been early 73, late 1972, the constitutional talks in London. And it was at that time that Sir Lyndon revealed that here was a man who was a white Bahamian from Abaco who was supporting the Progressive Liberal Party and independence. And one of the results of his support, or it seemed one of the results of his support, was that his airplane was shot up in Abaco. And I've known him over the years since then, working in agriculture, going up to Abaco to visit the Key and Sawyer farms, watching the cucumbers. I was then the producer for the agricultural program at the Bahamas Information Services. And I just wanted to say that I appreciated the intervention which he made just before me. And something which really struck me as worthy of repeating, because it's something we do have to help and rectify, and that is Moores Island, a place where the former Prime Minister once may have said in this house he would not even stop there. He wouldn't even fly over it, he said. It was so PLP. And I had great witness to that fact, because after the 2007 general election loss, there were complaints from the generals at Moores Island that the Progressive Liberal Party had not been back to see them. So shortly after New Year's of 2008, I jumped on a plane from Marsh Harbor and went over to spend the day with just a couple of hours' notice to the people of Moores Island I was coming. And it was the most incredible welcome I had ever gotten anywhere. Like, the place closed down business for the day. People came out to the airport. A bus was set aside. We rode into the town. People came out and waved and welcomed. A whole lunch and dinner was put on. And, you know, it's just me. So I was just so taken aback by the extent of the welcome and support that we got there. And so I identified with the things you've said about Moores Island and the things we have to do to help and support those people. So to the extent that I can help, I will. Right. The member, the Deputy Prime Minister, is saying that he plans to travel there on the 27th of June. So, and spend the day. So, and other cabinet colleagues will be coming. So, I think that's a good thing. And the Member of Parliament is invited to join. There are several preliminary points and objectives in today's intervention, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to state up front and in advance. And I wish to respond to the member for Montague on a couple of points. The first question of fighting crime, which he raised in his intervention yesterday, which he claimed was reduced to one stingy page. Clearly, the member does not understand. The strategy is a holistic strategy, not just reduced to the idea of policing. It requires all of our energies devoted to social peace, creating jobs, increasing skills, and providing hope. So the idea of fighting crime is the whole cloth of the budget. The whole cloth of the budget. All that we invest our time and money in is designed to get at that vexing problem. And there's nothing which can be separated from that fight. In this connection, so I would like to praise the initiative of the Member of Parliament for Bain and Grantstown to save men and boys, which was launched on Sunday last. It's amongst one of the many signs that we are getting it. No matter what, we cannot resile in the face of the dysfunctions that are affecting the young male community to the disadvantage of this society. I said it in another way, and that is this way. If you ran a factory and someone came to you and said that a particular part of your factory was causing your productivity to drop, and you were the owner of that factory, you would quite sensibly turn your resources to trying to fix that part of the factory that's causing the problem so your production can increase. And we have known that this issue of dysfunction of young males has been a problem for almost a generation. And I don't think we have gotten the lesson that we need to put sufficient resources into fighting that problem, to solving that issue. And so when I saw the invitation from Bain and Grantstown, I thought that this, of course, and I've known this is something which he has supported for years, because He once said to me, the member once said to me, you can't just throw up your hands in the air and say you can't do anything. You have to try and do something. And so I believe the measure should be supported. Secondly, the member for Montague, on 2 or more occasions during the intervention yesterday, made some passing references to the travel of the foreign minister. This member he was talking about. I suppose, in one sense, he was just having a bit of fun. But it seems to me that on the serious side, that people ought to, when they say those things, particularly someone in his position, it comes off as unintelligent. It comes off as unintelligent. And he really shouldn't be associating himself with that. You know, that's propaganda. That's propaganda. I would also like to applaud the group of men and women, the group of men and women, but the group that spoke that is 10 years behind me or more in this parliament. They've done well. The MP for Pine Ridge was on fire. The MP for South and Lutheran inspired us. The MP for Pinewood caused us to reflect. The MP for Fort Charlotte spoke artfully. The MP for Elizabeth was sound. The MP for Golden Isles created what we debate here today. The MP for Marco City challenged us. It is, again, all part of the whole cloth. And the great thing is they are all PLPs. Within the vast tent that is the PLP, let 1,000 ideas contend. The opposition must be careful in these circumstances not to become irrelevant to the times. And then I want to add my words of congratulations to Leon Williams on taking the helm of BTC. It seems to me that justice is served by this appointment. There is no question that this company has up to now not served the best interests of this country and this community. With this single act, a signal has been sent out that this company is willing to make amends for the abuse of this country's good nature in the complicity of the former Prime Minister. Bahamians now look to Mr. Williams, who, when he was there before, knew what he was doing. He did it before. We are confident that with God's help, he will do it again. And the Member of Parliament for my cow spoke to this morning at length. I'll belabor it just a bit more. I want to say this because already the deputy leader of the Free National Movement was in the press naysaying the appointment. And the question the Bahamians would want to ask is this the official position of the Free National Movement with regard to Mr. Williams' appointment? As for this side, let Mr. Williams know from this side that he has our unqualified support. The next point I want to make is this. Despite this country's challenges, there is more good in this country than there is evil. Despite all the challenges, there's more good in this country than there is evil. Secondly, the citizens of the country have an obligation to resist the air of unreality that now surrounds many of us, where unreasonable demands are being made in the face of the cold, hard fact that there is no money. Indeed, you will have read this morning of the results of the household survey and the confirmation of that which we have known as MPs on the ground, and that is that poverty has increased in the country. I invite you all to come up to my constituency office on a Monday morning Sometimes between the hours of 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., I see as many as 40 people. I do not think that there is a single one of them that is not unemployed. I think to myself, what must it take at 5 years old to leave his home and come to a complete stranger and ask him for help? Tell him all your business. Sometimes they're on the verge of tears, or sometimes in tears. And I asked my staff to be especially patient with people. I said, you know, for someone to wake up out of their bed and come and do that, they must be really on edge. So the least thing you say to them, they go off on you. But I say, you have to understand what a difficult time that is for people. That's why the Minister of National Insurance can tell you how furious I am that Kathleen McKinsey, one of my constituents, lost $500 from her national insurance packet. This is a lady who thinks she was getting $700 and something. National Insurance decided last year of the last administration they're going to do some review of national insurance, and as a result, she loses $500 that she'd been receiving for over 10 years from her packet from national insurance. $500. That's a lot of money. And even today, she's spoken to me, she's appealed, she's called the talk shows, she still calls the talk shows, and we're working for national insurance. But 3 years after that fateful, foolish decision to reduce this woman's benefit, it can't be righted. And it may take a court action for someone to understand that what was done was simply inequitable. And I tried to mobilize whatever resources I have. I heard the Member of Parliament for South Abaco talk about scarce resources. Boy, if you've got scarce resources. But I tried to mobilize the resources I have toward children. It just pains me to see little children having to beg for food to eat. And left to me, all the money I have would go there. It's simply that serious of a matter to me. So that's why I'm happy that the Minister for Social Services is who she is, because we need someone who has a heart, who is not lazy, and who gets to work on time, and who will help resolve these issues. Poverty is a demon which we must destroy before it saps the nation's will and productive energy and capacity in so many ways. And I am pledged to work to reduce and eliminate it. Next, Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the present economic exigencies, however, this budget to me, as a politician, is a guide and a pathway to whether or not we will win the general election in 2017. We can talk all the wonderful things we want about what we plan to do, all the great budgetary and fiscal feats which we plan to accomplish, but it will mean nothing if we do not, by this budget, give ourselves the best chance to win the general election in 2017. All that the Minister of Finance has said in this budget statement must be seen in that light. We cannot go down the path again we did in 2007, where we pronounced all the good works, but we were displaced from office and all the good works came to a halt. This means that those young men and women must get jobs, those small contractors must get those contracts. That is what drives the spending in this economy. I had never appreciated until recently how much this country and its economy depends on government spending. Those who argue that the government must cut back can directly be accused of helping to feed poverty, of which we are now so aware. Every time you cut back government spending, you contract this economy. Now, the question is not imprudence in spending. No one is saying to be a spendthrift. But there must be the right balance so that we do not contract this economy into nothingness and sorrow. For me, that means that Hubert Ingraham, the former Prime Minister, must not be allowed to come back to office. He was bad for this country in 2007. He and his colleagues set the country back 5 years. We must not go down that road again. So, this budget, as far as I'm concerned, is only useful to the extent that it helps to buttress the fight to prevent the possibility in our politics of the return of the former Prime Minister. He must be stopped. He will not be good for the Bahamas. All of us must take note that a great transition is taking place in this country from one generation to the next and embrace that transition rather than resist it. Shakespeare reminds us that we have our exits and our entrances from the stage. When the time is up, we must all know when to exit stage right or left. Carl Ramick, who is a pastor in Fox Hill, is about to retire from the pastorate at St. Paul's Baptist Church in the village. And he said something on his 32nd anniversary, that it is better to retire while people are saying you should stay rather than go when people are kicking you out. So I hope all of us remember that lesson, and the lesson is not lost on me as I look for successors, possible successors in Fox Hill, as we prepare for the general election of 2017, which, though 3 years out, is what this budget must be all about. In that respect, I was pleased to see the reported remarks of the Member of Parliament for Pinewood about the jaundiced view that many of our people have of politicians. I said to myself, at last, this generation is standing up for itself. It is a reflection of my own view, which I've repeated many times, and I say it here again. Politicians are no better or worse than the people from whom they come. Politicians are no better or worse than the people from whom they come. So, when you trash your politicians, you are in fact trashing yourselves. A second objective that I have to say, as I promised, is in this statement, was that I promised to give the state of play, as I understand it, with regard to the allegations revealed on the 19th of May about an agency of the government of the United States recording the mobile phone calls of Bahamians and visitors to our shores. I would then wish to lay out what I consider the next stage in our foreign relations and immigration strategies will be, and how I hope these policies will help grow this economy. I'd like to deal, however, at the start with the work that was done and is expected to be done in Fox Hill over the next year. I would like to address the work of the Select Committee, which was appointed to deal with benefits and allowances for members of Parliament. And I will speak to my full support of it and the construction of a new Parliament. The figures in the budget are there for all to see. There is no special magic in them, nothing that jumps out at us. Much was made of the fact that there's a million or near $2 million increase in the figures over last year's figures. My explanation is the general one that I have already given to the press, and that is, during the past year, the government made additional demands on the Foreign Service, which are now being accommodated in the actual spending, which is reflected in the figures that you see in the budget. I am pleased that there are increases in the operational expenses of the foreign offices abroad. I had to apologize several times during the past year to the staff of our missions abroad because of the financial triage which was witnessed upon these offices, causing shortfalls in areas which are fixed and operational in nature and which cause considerable personal distress and hardship upon officers overseas. I trust and I am promised that this will not occur this fiscal year. Secondly, I know that disappointment has already been expressed through the Permanent Secretary by Foreign Service officers who are living in some pretty dire circumstances overseas as they serve this country, and who were promised, after negotiations, increases in their foreign service allowances and new foreign service orders, and they think that this budget does not reflect them. I spoke to the Minister of State about their concerns, who assures me that the subventions are there. I am pleased at that, and I thank him. To the attention of the Minister of Finance that the subvention for the repatriation of illegal migrants was cut by $500,000. Considerable savings will be affected in the repatriation exercises by the fact that Bahamas Air will no longer charge the commercial rate to the Bahamas government for repatriation, but instead will only charge the costs of the crew and the fuel charges to the government, thus allowing the reduction in this year's figure over last year. The figures so far for this year are as follows, and I'm going to quote from a report from the department which summarizes some of the statistics. On the 5th of November, 2013, a new team commenced Operation Clean Up Bahamas, the focus of which is to target construction sites, roadblocks in east and west, food stores, gas stations, shanty towns, and inland areas in New Providence and the Family Islands to apprehend illegal immigrants who have contravened the immigration laws. Since the introduction of this operation, from the 5th of November 2013 to the 31st of May 2014, a total of 2,381 migrants were arrested. This included 1,846 Haitians and 536 other nationals. And then there's an extensive breakdown of those repatriated from this country between the time January to December 2013, which amounted to a total of 3,868 people were repatriated to their home countries last year, from January to December. The largest group of that were Haitian nationals, which amounted to, of that number, of the 3,868 that were repatriated last year, 3,033 were Haitian nationals. The next largest group were Cubans at 157. Now this year, then when you compare in the period between January to May of 2013, the amount of people repatriated was 1,381 people, of which 1,042 were Haitians. But when you compare it to the January to May 2014 period, the amount is 1,982. So over the same period, we had 1,982 compared to 1,381. The repatriation costs for last year was $1,191,250.27. $1,191,250.27. And we had to have a top-up of $300,000 because the fund was exhausted in and around March. And up to date, we have spent $1,356,805 up to date. So the budgeted figure for last year was $1.2 million. We've now exhausted that and gone over it. It's $1.356 million. In terms of illegal boat landings, there were 1,899 for the year, January to December 2013. That's 1,899. And from the 1st of January to the 31st of May, there have been 667 so far this year. Now, I'm advised that the immigration promotions are to take place within the next fiscal year. And this is quite a sore point because it's taken 2 years to get to this point. In addition, The 100 officers approved by the Cabinet in this fiscal year will actually begin classes, it now appears, next fiscal year. I'd hoped to be ready on the 26th of May, but again, bureaucratic delays have waylaid the best laid plans. I don't wish, however, as a result of this statement today, to be deluged by applications for immigration officers, because the recruitment is in fact complete. The process is done, and it just is awaiting the work of the Department of Public Service. I again ask for officers in both the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Department of Immigration to hold on as we seek to bring redress to these very important issues. At this juncture, Speaker, I wish to pay tribute to the 4 victims of the shootings in Fox Hill on the 27th of December last year. This was an unspeakable and horrible tragedy, which has not gotten better but worse in the months since it passed from the public consciousness. The community leaders in Fox Hill are struggling to keep that community together. They are, of course, resource challenged. The government, thanks to my honorable friend, the Deputy Prime Minister, was able to put extra funding into the clearing of lots, but these lots have now grown back up again, and due to the lack of resources, we are unable to meet the expectations of the community to do something about it. To say it is a struggle to keep the peace is very much an understatement. I want to commend the leaders of the original Congo's Junkanoo group, and they're also the leaders of the scouting troop in Fox Hill, for their exemplary leadership. And in particular, Warren Davis, who's a Defense Force officer full-time, and Trevor Pratt, who's a building contractor, who've literally kept this community going since that assault on the community on the 27th of December. They have functions continuously, almost every week, to try and keep the younger ones engaged and the community focused on a way forward and not looking backwards. I want to commend the leadership in Fox Hill, Reverends Preston Moss of St. Anselm's, Carl Ramick of St. Paul's, Carrington Pinder of St. Mark's, Hugh Bartlett of St. Anne's, Warren Anderson of Mount Carey, Alima Bethel of Coke Methodist Church, Emily Demerit of Coke Methodist Church MCCA, Pauline Johnson of the Church of God, Shireen Saunders of the Church of God Faith Mission, Hartman Nixon of Macedonia, Leonardo Ramming of Maranatha, Julia Bain of the Church of God Bernard Road, Mario Moxie of Bahamas Harvest. And I want to extend my grateful thanks to the principals of the schools, Samlin's Primary, Esther Culmer, Janet Nixon from L.W. Young, and Laurel Lundy at Doris Johnson. And I wish to add words of farewell to the outgoing principal of Doris Johnson Senior High School, Linda Major, who is now retired. One positive project is that of the monument designed by Edwin White and Clinton Pierce that we want to now construct to those who died in December. We are hoping to commission it during the Fox Hill Festival when the Prime Minister comes to Fox Hill for his annual visit, and I hope that other members of Parliament would avail themselves of the opportunity for this exposure to this unique festival. It is important that this gets done to honor the 4 dead: Claude Zeno Davis, Shanique Sands, Eric Morrison, and Shaquille Demerit. I'm quite pleased by the design of the monument, and the families have all approved the designs, so let's get it built. I wish to tell you that since that time, the mother of one of the people killed witnessed her other son being robbed at gunpoint on TV cameras just outside their home in Fox Hill as he pulled up in the vehicle returning from an outing. She herself was robbed of $1,300 while in the graveyard visiting her son's grave. That was money that she had set aside, just taken out of the bank, to buy a headstone for her son's grave. An 18-year-old who was shot down in the flower of his life for no reason. The pain does not stop, Mr. Speaker, and it does not read well for this community, even as it disappears from the headlines. Then there is the rehabilitation of those who survived the attack. One man had his operation postponed as a public patient 5 times before he finally got the operation done. Just spoke to the minister about this at St. Agnes on Sunday. Both he and I were beside ourselves. But the old Vanguard slogan says, dare to struggle and dare to win. And I keep saying that to myself as we face the challenges and vicissitudes of life in the Bahamas. And I recommend it to the younger ones. Dare to struggle, dare to win. I'd like to thank BTC for their offer in assisting to rehabilitate the park and getting the monument built, and I wish to invite the public at large to come to the ceremony on Fox Hill Day. I also want to thank Jerome Brown, the contractor, and the architect Carlos Butler of the Ministry of Works for the design and construction of the gazebo on the Eastwood Park. I thank the Prime Minister, Minister of Works, and the Minister of State for Finance for their support of this project. I expect that the pavilion will be officially commissioned within the coming months. I want to thank the leadership of the Eastwood Property Owners Association, headed by Cleome Wood, for their dedication and commitment to their neighborhood, and Kevin Major of East Park Estates Owners Association, and Michael Bullard for his work with the homeless. This is a convenient time, Mr. Speaker, to speak about the work of the Select Committee of the Parliament that was appointed last year to report on the allowances and benefits for members of Parliament and to address the question of a new Parliament. Let me say, without equivocation, and for all to hear loud and clear, that the report has my 100% support without deviation or dissent. It was in fact signed by both political sides, although I saw where the leader of the opposition tried to step back from it. It is a sensible and reasonable report. And it does not mean that because you are planning various matters or discussing various items that you cannot also take care of other needs. It is not a zero-sum game. You can walk and chew gum all at the same time. Or, as was said during the Second World War, you can praise God and pass the ammunition. Since the report was delivered, I have never heard such ill-informed and idle and inaccurate commentary claptrap in many, many, many moons. And I constantly ask myself, what the heck is wrong with some of the folk in this country? I comfort myself with this fact. It is the right thing to do. Last year, when I spoke as the mover of this resolution for the appointment of the committee, I said to members then that I was prepared to take the political hit for it if it would result in better terms and conditions for members of Parliament in the future. I spoke then to the youngsters, or for the youngsters, who want to become members of this place. None of them that I know of, that I interact with, even the ones who are here now, are to the manner born. No silver spoons in any of their mouths. They're all people of modest means. I said at the time of the motion that Sir Lyndon Pinling, when he defended the salaries and benefits to the Parliament in 1977, he said he and his colleagues were putting in place salaries which would allow men and women of modest means to serve without going into penury. That's still the rationale today. I recall my first cousin, Sammy Isaacs, who was described by the late Sir Edion Depuch as a mere plumber, when Mr. Isaacs defeated Mr. Depuch for the seat in the Eastern District in 1956 as one of the first of the 6 PLP MPs. Mr. Isaacs was driven almost to the point of bankruptcy because he served in this place by wanting to serve his country. And I said how my own mother warned me about getting into politics because of that. That's the experience of our family. You go broke going into politics. I said that as I prepared to leave the scene myself, I did not want to have another generation of members of Parliament come into this place and meet things in the shape that they are. Members of Parliament literally spending their time begging for money. More politely put as fundraising to be able to maintain not themselves in office, but just to maintain a constituency. The first thing is, Mr. Speaker, is the report did not have a remit to deal with salaries. That's the first thing. It wasn't about salaries. It simply made the point that as an historical fact, salaries had not been reviewed in almost a generation. But this was not a matter for us, but for a special review panel. That's what the report says. That suddenly becomes members of Parliament want to raise what I call public policy by the misperceptions of Candia Dames. And then off the crazies go. Yeah, you know, all kinds of nonsense about timing and this and that and terror, as my grandaunt used to say. Yada, yada, yada. Terror. This, that, and terror. Understand? Yeah. This, that, and terror. And to show you what the state of the public policy is, Mr. Speaker, when people troll this nonsense on Facebook, I had the temerity. I usually don't post anything on it, but I had the temerity to actually say what the facts are in the face of this nonsense. The response to me was I should shut up. In other words, no one wants to hear the truth. They just want to peddle a good story. Nowhere was this more disappointing for me than the response of 2 former members of Parliament who have to know better. Randall McCartney of the DNA denounced it. But Mr. McCartney, too, appears to me, didn't read the report. And should know in his heart that the report is absolutely correct. And not simply jump on whatever convenient bandwagon is passing by to get a headline in the newspapers. Desperate. That's why he's going. He must know. He served as an MP in this place for 5 years. He must know the level of demands on MPs. Just this week, in my office, I've had requests for scholarships, donations for cookouts, programs, ads, fundraisers amounting to over $2,000 just one weekend. Just one weekend. Now, how is a member? How is a member of Parliament? Which member of Parliament is expected to meet all those expenses? In which time? In which day? How? Many people criticize what the Deputy Prime Minister had to say. But, Mr. Speaker, unless you are born with wealth, it leaves MPs at the mercy of looking to one benefactor or the next to make contributions to assist. And you can see the danger in that, where there are no rules in place as to how you take a donation and who you take it from and under what circumstances. No rules. In fact, the whole issue of salaries came into being, Mr. Speaker, because the men who ran the country prior to 1967, the progenitors of the Free National Movement, the UBP, were not being paid, or so they said. So they told us. What we found out, of course, following the Commission of Inquiry, though, was they had lined their pockets in other ways. Using their office to give themselves contracts and consultancy fees which led to obvious conflicts of interest. The idea of full-time ministers was to ensure as much as possible that the possibility of conflict did not arise. Of course, being a full-time minister, that didn't stop one minister in the last administration of increasing his wealth in 5 years from net 7 million to almost net 60.
So we know where that came from.
The Instant Select Committee report said two things. The allowance for the maintenance of an office and staff for an MP should be increased from $1,500 to $2,500. Most MPs today, Mr. Speaker, are subsidizing their offices out of their pockets. When I spoke to a member of the opposition, he said if he wasn't able to get a concessionary rate from a friend of his or a colleague or an ally, he'd even know where he'd be. Can't afford it. So it cuts both ways. That's simply wrong. Secondly, the report said the figure which the government allows as MPs to use to get things done in their constituencies should be moved from $50,000, which is what it is today, to $100,000 to what it used to be. None of this money comes into the pockets of MPs. None of it. Imagine my shock then. That is not included in the budget because of the hue and cry. Who suffers in the end but the people of the constituency? And the suffering is caused, the hue and cry is motivated by a few miscreants who just don't know the facts and in fact don't care what the facts are. All they want to do is to stop what the government is doing. Just stop anything, create any clutter, noise, mess. The former MP for Angliston, who is now a columnist in the press, must know that this is the right thing to do. Yet he too joined Mr. McCartney in spreading this misinformation. This is something that we should all be simply, in my view, we should all be simply silent on it and just simply get it done. It's the right thing to do. I gave the example, talking yesterday in the committee room, of the former Minister of the Government. We all know him well. Served this country for 20 years or more. His name's probably on some public buildings. Who showed up in the Princess Margaret Hospital near the end of his life and could not get served because he had no money and no one knew who he was. I think a call, we were in the cabinet at the time, a call had to be made, say, you know so-and-so is down here, can you all do something to at least get him a bed in the hospital? Served the country for 25 years with distinction, and he had fallen on hard times. When the government found out, we took emergency measures to approve the spending for his care. The committee simply said that this could be done much more cheaply and efficiently by adding former MPs to the insurance. So you're former MP, you show up to the hospital, whatever hospital, you get the medical care. That's all it said. It also said, members of Parliament, the member for Mycal was talking about access to his constituency, the member for Exuma, the member for South Andros, the member for North Andros and the Berry Islands. All have to get to their constituencies. The Grand Bahama MPs have to get back and forth. It said that they ought to be able to do that at the public expense if they're on official business. What's the issue with that? You know, we lost the Turks and Caicos Islands way back in the 19th century because they had to come all the way from Provo here. And that was a long journey in those days. And they say, well, heck, we making all the salt money. I know why we got to come to Nassau to any Parliament. It's just the right thing to do. Just as it is, Mr. Speaker, the right thing to do to get the Parliament building built. People keep talking like this Parliament building is not going to be a benefit to the community. What do you think they can do? Just build a building and be empty? No one's going to be in it? Jeez. I mean, right now, there's no major construction work going on in New Providence that will hire scores of young Bahamian males. None. Ask any MP, and they will tell you the cries of the young males for work. And we all know that construction jobs drive spending in this country. Just go to Abaco. I've said this before. Go to Marsh Harbor, Abaco on a Friday afternoon when those young fellas get off that boat from Baker's Bay and land in the town. And see how money spends. If you want to see money spent, you know, the girlfriends, they get there, right off the top. Right off the top. Absolutely. Exactly, exactly. And the town is just alive with excitement. And the Bahamar project is not doing it for us for obvious reasons. So when the LPIA airport project closed, there should have been another major project in New Providence that would take on board some young men. That could have been a new Parliament building. Yes. It would hire hundreds, if not thousands, of Bahamian craftsmen and artisans. In any event, in this country, my experience is it takes 3 years or more from the time you actually start to design a building to putting shovels in the ground. So it's unlikely that it can get going before the end of this term. Secondly, money has to be found for it, and I said last year, part of all the outreach to other countries was about finding new sources of capital for this country. See all these people, the foreign minister of Trinidad calls it leveraging. Everybody and their grandmother comes running to the CARICOM countries. We need your 14 votes for this. We need your 14 votes for that. You know, hand come. You see the Prime Minister negotiated a whole stadium for the young people. That's right. Qatar is coming there. So we have the Qatar Airlines is now flying into Miami. So you're talking to them about outreach to them. But that's what we're trying to do. New markets, new opportunities, new people, fresh capital. You know, maybe we can get something done. You know, and with this politics business, you got to come ranging up and down the dial. And you'll hit something. The point is, we have to get going. But everything is negative, negative, negative. Yeah, you know, noise in the market. And look at this place, Mr. Speaker. Look at this place. With due respect, this is a dump. The staff are sitting upon one another, packed in like the poor, 3 to a bed. The bathrooms are shared with the public and the members and the staff. The facilities for the press are inadequate. No offices for members. No privacy when meetings for constituents come. It's impossible. The facilities for the public to come to and see meetings to access the history of the place, the records, all inadequate. But no, we must stay right here. We are sinking down in this dump and the mud, but we must stay right here and do that. No meeting rooms. The place isn't often clean. Can't be. I mean, how long are we going to do this? You know, those youngsters came here today. Those youngsters came here today. I would bet for the first time in their lives they've been to the Parliament of the Bahamas where all the power resides. I'll bet you they can't believe this is the place. Cannot believe it. All of us huddled downstairs in that little lobby downstairs, crowded around, can't talk to one another, people walking up and... What are we doing? It's disgraceful. In 2014, we're still in a building that reflects the choices of the loyalists 200 years ago. In the 21st century. And we say that this is emblematic, this reflects what we are today? If this what reflects what we are today, my brother, we're in a sad state. I say it does not, and we need a new building. Now, my final point on this again is this.
You don't do it, they still give you.
Exactly. All these youngsters who want to get here, and I could call some names, a fellow named Kashmir Farrington, Giasante Beneby, Navar Smith up in Grand Bahama, Quinton Lightman. Now, they're the real next generation. I hear these fellas calling themselves the next generation, but that's the next generation. And left to me, when they get here, they should not have to face that problem. I'm fighting for them. And I do not want some youngster who gets here 10, 15 years from now and say to me, you all were here all those years and you left this dump in which for us to operate. Now, not this loyal son of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Not me. And the manufactured anti-public opinion on it is simply wrong, 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 and wrong again. Now, and you know, when you get up in age, the younger ones talk to you any kind of how, you know. Yeah, they say anything to you. You know, I see. You know, it's a unique experience for me. Yeah. I was a well-behaved lad. I heard where the member for Montague was trying to use the words of A. Loftus Roca against us. Let me just give him some unsolicited advice, Matt. Don't go there. Don't go there. You see, I have a slightly different take from the member from Waikau. I look at the comments by men like Loftus Roca in the way, you know, my dad used to talk to me. Tell me anything you like. That was my dad. So, you don't get in that. You just leave that alone, man. You know? You know, and you know, everyone knows Roca and I were quite close. So, you know, my view is some things you just leave it alone. I mean, what is it going to profit me? At his age and stage, I figure he could say anything he wants to say. But I also know, yeah, I mean, you know, exactly. Oh, you know, exactly. He'd say what he wants to say. You know, I don't, you know, fair enough. But I also know right now who's in the seat of power. The fact that he says that doesn't change who's in the government. The fact that we make decisions.
He's old enough to be kind.
I understand, but you know.
Well, I say that and I mean that. He's
Yeah.
old enough to be
No,
kind.
I understand. I understand.
Not to be abusive, to be aged.
No. You trying to use those things for mischief. You know. And all I'm saying is don't get in that and don't go down that road. And I just leave that like that. And you know, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with him. You know, my view is we're the government. We're going to govern. The member of Parliament for Centerville is the Prime Minister. How's that? I remember, Mr. Speaker, sitting down at a public presentation being made by the late Dame Eugenia Charles at a CARICOM ceremony. Now, Eugenia Charles had long retired from office, and the fellows from CARICOM called themselves giving her an award for all of the contribution which she had made to CARICOM as a great CARICOM leader. And while they were busy lauding her from the stage, she was sitting in the front row shouting out, "Foolishness, foolishness, nonsense." I say, this is one cranky woman now. You know? Eugenia Charles, the former Prime Minister of Dominica. I'm saying they're giving her an honor. CARICOM is right there. These young prime ministers, what she is, this and that, and all the rest of it. And she's there sucking her teeth and saying, foolishness, nonsense. So you just let it pass. And On the other end, it reminds me of my friend Sonny Martin, the late Sonny Martin. He's telling me how the Anglican priest at Christ the King in Grand Bahama had persuaded him to become a Sunday school teacher. And Father Bain, he may have lasted 3 weeks. He say, Father, these Lutherans too rude, man. I can't. I can't deal with them. But that's the time. As for the Parliament and the allowance and salaries, it seems to me, Mr. Speaker, the serious point is this. People will always say, in my view, it's not the right time to do it. My view is, talk about this too much. Just do what you have to do. Just do it. Just do it. For the Lord's sake, for the love of God, let's stop carping and complaining and get on with it and do it. Now, I want to turn to the promised report on the allegations of spying by United States agencies in the Bahamas. Yesterday, I received the following report, which was provided by our embassy in Washington. And it said this: the embassy was advised yesterday that the State Department is currently working on an official response to your letter, which was written for the attention or action of the Honourable John Kerry. It is anticipated you will receive a response within 1 week. The particular issue is the following allegation, which has not been controverted by the United States government, and I quote from the statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs given on the 20th of May, 2014. It reads in part as follows: on the 19th of May, at a routine lunch with U.S. Chargé d'Affaires John Dinkelman, he flagged the possibility of a story being released based on the leaks of the former U.S. government employee Edward Snowden, and that they would involve the Bahamas and the use of monitoring apparatus in the Bahamas. This was a more specific warning than two warnings that had been earlier given by senior personnel at the U.S. Embassy here, including one by Mr. Dinkelman. The story became widely available, it appears, sometime around midday on the 19th of May, and is penned by, amongst others, Glenn Greenwald, a journalist reportedly based in Brazil, who has penned previous work sourced from documents leaked by Mr. Snowden. The Snowden allegations are believed to relate to a period in and around 2011. The article, as is material, says the following, and I quote, according to documents provided by NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, the surveillance is part of a top-secret system codenamed Sommelget that was implemented without the knowledge or consent of the Bahamian government. Instead, the agency appears to have used access legally obtained in cooperation with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency to open a backdoor to the country's cellular telephone network, enabling it to covertly record and store the full take audio of every mobile call made to, from, and within the Bahamas, and to replay those calls for up to a month. End of quote. As of this moment, we are none the wiser as to the truth or otherwise of these allegations. We have raised this matter with our CARICOM sister countries and with the Organization of American States. We have heard from the agencies in our own country that no one in authority, insofar as the political level was concerned, authorized any such listening or monitoring. We have determined that the appropriate forum on a multilateral basis is the Organization of American States. We've also taken note of the comments of the two ministers of the former government who also denied authorizing any such listening device in the Bahamas. At the moment, the issue is being discussed bilaterally. There have been many views espoused, but almost universally there is the view that we must know the truth of these allegations, and if that is in fact the case, then the activity should cease, must cease. One side of public opinion has indicated that they do not care whether they are monitored or not, since they have nothing to hide, and if the matter assists our national security, then what is the harm? With the greatest of respect to those individuals, that is hardly the point. The fact is, your conversations are proprietary to you. In other words, they are your intellectual property, just as your land or car is your property. The right to control what happens to that property is yours and yours alone, save in those circumstances where, in the interest of public morality, health, public defense, or some other overarching public interest, that property is acquired or disposed of in some manner inconsistent with your ownership of it. Further, and quite apart from the constitutional guarantees of the right to privacy, there are also the statutory protections of the Listening Devices Act and the Data Protection Act. Recently, at the Privy Council in the Judicial Committee, our appellate court in the case Newbold and others against the United States of America ruled on the 16th of April 2014 the following at paragraph 58 of the judgment. It may be that the Bahamian legislature would wish to reconsider whether it, the savings clause in the Constitution, Article 30, remains appropriate in the modern era. Even apart from that, it may in any event be that, in light of the board's view that the Listening Devices Act would not meet current constitutional standards had it been appropriate to apply them, the Bahamian legislature would wish to consider whether the scheme provided by the Listening Devices Act should now be revisited and revised. What the judgment appears to say, that if the current Constitution standards had been applied to the Listening Devices Act passed in 1972, it would have been declared unconstitutional. However, it was saved because of an article in our Constitution which says that if something was constitutional before 1973, it cannot now be declared unconstitutional because of the new Constitution. I believe that it is in this light that the legislation is being reviewed by the Attorney General's office. I am now able to advise that in light of the continuing conversations with the U.S. side, we are allowing diplomacy to take its course for the moment. In the meantime, our own agencies are doing a thorough review of the allegations with ongoing reports to the government, and I promise to keep the country informed. There are those who also say that the United States is too big or large for us to challenge this behavior, that we depend on them for too much, so we should let the matter be. I agree that they are larger than us, richer than us, and more powerful than us. That is the way of the world. But I have made the point in another forum. If you defeat me by your power, I can do nothing about that. But I have a responsibility to stand up for my rights, whatever power is arrayed before me. I can at least challenge the great power to live up to the tenets of its own creed and the morality of its own principles. The other word of caution that I would add is that in the view of the government, this does not go to the fundaments of the relationship with the United States of America. We choose, on the basis of the available evidence, to see this first as an allegation, and secondly, if true, an aberrant rather than a regular occurrence. For good or ill, we are joined at the hip, and we have to ensure that relations continue in all the spheres in which good work is done, rather than dwell on the one possible aberrant irritant in the relationship. Mr. Speaker, I am not going to pass up this opportunity to respond to the slimy remarks made by the former Deputy Prime Minister and former Minister of Foreign Affairs, who, no matter what he may think of me, has, in my view, no basis to make the slur against me that in standing up for the Bahamas, I am anti-American. I consider it a slur, and perhaps he may want to have said something else, but does not have the courage to say it. I want to assure the former Member of Parliament that I owe no money to Commonwealth Bank, and so the well-known practice associated with some in his family of calling in loans when the borrower's politics was opposed to the lender does not apply to me. However, I would wish to treat him to a lesson in moral equivalence. I read in the press that the winners of the Catholic raffle recently were two men who were owners of the Numbers houses in the Bahamas, one Adrian Fox and Sebastian. I believe that these men are two of the most successful Bahamian entrepreneurs of their generation, who turned an unregulated activity into a mega fortune. The government is in the process of regulating their activities, but that is neither here nor there. For the moment, some say that the activity is unlawful. There was a time, and the former Deputy Prime Minister would know of it, when bootlegging in the United States was an activity which grounded the fortunes of many, many Bahamians, who were then able to transform their wealth into leadership in politics and in commerce. One of those, then a leader of the government, also one, I believe, it would have been the Catholic raffle way back in 1965. He could have afforded to donate, as the two men in his generation did, to give the car back to the church as well, but did not. But instead, as he was entitled to do, he kept the car and rode in the car, sometimes chauffeur-driven. In other words, he kept the car. No problem. The interesting point, though, is when the people who use the wealth from one generation, once considered ill-gotten gains, and now converted into legal cash, they then want to lecture others about their moral standing in a country which was built up by the blood, sweat, and tears of my own father and countless others. I do not take it lightly or without grave offense. It must be clear that I do not and will not shrink from saying so at every opportunity. The Bible says, take the mote from your own eye before making groundless accusations about others. Further, it can be recalled that the party with whom he is now associated opposed the independence of this country. I have, since I was a child, supported the independence of this country. The story of how they opposed independence we choose in this day not to repeat in order to keep the peace until someone comes along and makes the kind of foolish statement which was made about me during this debate on the alleged NSA spying. I should also join issue with those on the other side who keep mixing up apples and oranges with regard to something which the Prime Minister, for administrative purposes, has styled the National Intelligence Agency. This is nothing more, my understanding, than ad hoc division of individuals in the government that are simply, at this stage, responsible for the gathering of information to design what a proper NIA is supposed to be. It has no executing power and certainly does not have the authority or power to execute warrants which will listen to the conversations of mobile phone calls or any other calls or correspondence. This attack on this nascent agency is therefore a complete and utter red herring, and the other side should desist. I am pleased, Mr. Speaker, to be able to superintend the foreign policy of the Bahamas and to face the world on behalf of the Bahamas. Whatever budget the Minister of Finance has given us, whatever the budget is, even if it's $1, that's all, whatever we get, we will use it fully and to the best of our abilities and without wastage. I am not embarrassed about this country. I am proud of this country. Yes. This is a wealthy country. The only question for me, as a matter of public policy, is to ensure that the wealth is equitably distributed, that there is social mobility, that poverty is reduced, if not eliminated. Everything we do in foreign affairs is to that end. I've spoken to the Permanent Secretary about the need for us to look more closely at the service components of the ministry. I am deeply disturbed on the level of service in areas where we interface with the public, the passport office, the consular services, and just plain answering the phone in the ministry, returning the phone calls of the public, and answering their correspondence. These are where we meet people. It is not easy, but we must meet their needs. A similar story is also told to me too often by the public about the Department of Immigration. However, I want to advise the public that immigration is severely resource challenged, but during this budget year, we shall again try our best to meet their demands. The demands are justifiable, which is the timely response, the demands from the public are justifiable, and that is largely the timely response to applications and the fair and prompt adjudication of their requests. From the management side, we have to commit ourselves to better equipment. For example, the next generation of equipment for the Passport Office and the Immigration Department is overdue. Almost all countries now have some form of electronic border entry. The Bahamas should not be left behind. In this fiscal year, we hope to conclude our outreach to the United Arab Emirates and to Qatar with some form of representation in the Middle East. We are still hopeful for an actual physical presence in Jamaica and in Brazil. Of course, all of this carries with it a cost, but the returns will be significant. We are in an interesting place. Yesterday, I heard the member for Montague try to contradict the Minister of Finance by saying that we do not have an overwhelming mandate to carry out our programs. I understand what he said, and I understand that you have to make a point, but let me make mine. Try this math. 38 seats in the House of Assembly. There are 30 who are PLP, and there are 8 who are F&M. Now, when I went to school,
One is unknown, principle is one is unknown.
well, 30, you can't complicate my math too much. Show me off. Now, so 30 are PLP and 8 are F&M. Now, when I went to school, that meant you take 38 and you take away 30, and that leaves 8, okay? And when I went to school, 8 goes into 30 3 times with sometimes left over, right? Yeah. 3 into 30? Yeah. Yeah, 3 3/4. Okay, all right. So we got 3 3/4 more. Okay. I don't think that has changed since I went to school. Now, as for counting of the votes, saying that we are the minority of the popular vote, well, that's the system, though. We don't have proportional representation here. And in any event, the F&M should know how that feels in any event, since they were a minority government, if you go by that, from 2007 to 2012. But they were the government. Now, we are the government. We have an overwhelming mandate to govern. We intend to serve out our term. I, with God's help, shall be campaigning for another term. And I don't want people on the PLP side to go wobbly because of the member from Montague. We must stay the course. I want to say to them, your worst day in government is better than your best day in opposition. We, my colleagues and I, do not live in a bubble. Everything you feel, we feel. There are no individuals, men or women, connected to this side who are to the manner born. All of us come from the people. We are the people. The people of the Bahamas should know that, and judging from what I've heard, these youngsters who spoke before me, who said what they said in here, we have a good future in front of us. It's left only for me to say, Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank the people of Fox Hill for allowing me to serve. I thank my colleagues for their support, the Prime Minister for this appointment. I take this country in my heart wherever I go. I never leave it behind. Cuss us if you will. That is your right, but cuss us in love. We love you as we must. We love you. For Christ's sake, amen.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the member for Long Island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for this opportunity for allowing me to stand on 3 various points that were raised by the member for Fox Hill, two of which was regard to me. Mr. Speaker, very early in his contribution today, the member for Fox Hill attributed something with regards to an LBGT movement that he said I was creating some type of something against him with regards to creating propaganda. Well, maybe he can give clarification, Mr. Speaker, when he stands. Mr. Speaker, members did say the deputy leader of the opposition, and
no, you could go on. I'll send you out a member for Fox Hill to respond to it.
And secondly, Mr. Speaker, I stand on a point for a colleague who no longer sits in this place. Mr. Speaker, there was an argument back and forth in the press, at which time the member for Fox Hill had every opportunity to throw slurs as well, with regards to not just that member, but also to myself. And to get in here and to continue to impugn the character of one that cannot defend themselves, and to go way back, Mr. Speaker, to a crime which he is suggesting was illegal outside of this country, and to impugn the character of that individual has got to be wrong. And finally, Mr. Speaker, when you speak about this agency which he says is basically innocuous, the NIA of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, I stand once again to say that the member for Fox Hill obviously seems to think that he is the only one that has a brain that functions in this place, because everybody knows that any agency of this government, the Bahamas government, must have a legislative frame from which to operate. And I stand fast and continue to say that if it is existing illegally, despite his protests about it being innocuous. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would like for him to please retract those particular statements, especially as it relates to the nasty slurs that he stood in here and hurled just now against the former Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. Member for Fox Hill, yours.
I'm actually quite flabbergasted.
You always are.
I'm just flabbergasted.
Members, allow the member to respond.
Which world do you live in?
Member, continue to address the chair.
Where does one start? You know, at the beginning. First, I thought, when I spoke at the start, the question of LGBT, I thought I was being kind to you. That's what I thought.
You weren't being kind. You were not.
No, I thought so. I thought so. I didn't make any accusation against you at all. I said
through the chair, member.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and you can get the transcript of this. I said that I wanted to live in a country where there was tolerance, and that I had made a remark earlier in the year for which people took exception, that I had suffered because of my views on that matter. And I gave as an example that recently I saw a news site using, in order to affect a slur against the member for Long Island, the initials of your name, but adding the letter G to it. And they were doing it precisely to cause a slur. That's what I said, which I disagreed with. I said that it should be a society where we judge it based on your character, your views, but not to go down that road. That's what I said. That's what I said. Now, whether you get angry at that, that's totally off the mark. I made no such accusation. That's the point. Yes.
Member from Fox Hill, you still have the floor.
That's point number one. Now, the second point about a slur against the former member of this place. Well, I'm not sure how it affects him at all, because the history of the country is what it is. And I'm sure if you speak to him, he'd tell you the same thing. Well, you know, all I consider, you know, all I consider, no, I mean, you know, if you want, I could go further down that road.
Members.
But the point is this. Yeah, they should. the point is this, Mr. Speaker. The point is this.
I got a number of that to come up, whatever I got.
Let's do something.
I will read you this.
The point is this. The facts are what they are. And when someone makes an allegation against me, I consider that a very serious matter. I told people that, I've spoken to my colleagues here, that I take that seriously, and just as he may take, that's fine by him, but you understand. Yeah, I'm saying I use what, no, I don't know about anything about nastiness. All I know is I laid out the facts. I laid out the facts. Now, as for the second one, with the last point, with regard to NIA, whether there ought to be a legal framework or not a legal framework, that is an argument which you can make. In fact, the minister has already indicated that a free legal framework is coming. My interest is only this. They're using the present allegations about the NSA, mixing them with NIA, and saying that the government is spying on Bahamians through NIA.
You're the one who said that we knew about NSA.
I never, again, wrong again. Wrong again.
Members,
Wrong again.
members,
Wrong again. Wrong again. Wrong again. Never made any such allegation. Never made any such allegation. You know, never made any such allegation. All we said is, you must account to us for what happened prior to the time we were in office. So that's the story as far as I'm concerned on those.
Thank you, honourable member. Members, as many?